I never thought I'd end up writing something like this, but here I am sharing my story. My name is Mark, and I've been married to Linda for 10 years. We have two wonderful kids, a boy and a girl, and we've always seemed like a perfect family. At least that's what I thought. Things started to change a few months ago. I noticed Linda was acting different. It was subtle at first. She was distracted, often on her phone, and sometimes she'd snap at me for no reason. I shrugged it off, thinking she was just stressed with work and the kids. After all, life can get hectic when you're a full-time mom and a part-time marketing consultant. But then came the little things, like how she started dressing up more often, even if we were just hanging around the house. She'd put on that red lipstick she hadn't worn in years. I remember thinking it was a nice touch, but then I started to wonder why she'd bother putting in that effort for a night in with the family. I felt a strange pit in my stomach, but I convinced myself that I was just being paranoid. One day, I came home from work early to surprise her. I thought maybe we could have some quality time together. I walked into the house, and the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. No kids shouting, no TV blaring, just silence. My gut feeling kicked in again, but I dismissed it. I called out for Linda, and she didn't respond. I headed toward our bedroom, thinking maybe she was taking a nap. Then I heard laughter. It was coming from the living room. My heart sank as I approached the source of the sound. Peeking through the slightly ajar door, I saw her there on the couch with Jake, the tutor we hired for our kids. They were sitting way too close for comfort, and the look on Linda's face was one I hadn't seen in a long time. It was the kind of look you give someone when you're completely lost in the moment, oblivious to everything else around you. They were sharing a bottle of wine, giggling like teenagers, and I felt my blood boil. I could hardly breathe as I stepped back, trying to process what I had just witnessed. Part of me wanted to storm in there and confront them right away, but another part of me held back. I needed to gather my thoughts. I retreated to the kitchen, my mind racing. I thought about the trust we had built over the years, the life we had created together, and how it was all crashing down in a matter of seconds. After a few minutes, I gathered the courage to confront her. I walked back into the living room and found them still on the couch, but as soon as they saw me, the laughter stopped. The air was thick with tension. Linda's eyes widened in shock, and Jake's face turned pale. I crossed my arms, trying to appear calm, but inside I was a storm of emotions. "What's going on here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My heart raced as I locked eyes with Linda, searching for any sign of guilt. "Care to explain why you're spending time like this with our children's tutor?" Linda opened her mouth to respond, but I was ready for the lies to come pouring out. I could already hear the excuses forming in her mind. "It's not what it looks like, Mark," she said, her voice shaky. "We were just discussing the kids' progress." I felt a wave of anger and disbelief wash over me. "Discussing?" I replied. "You call this discussing? You're practically wrapped around each other." Her forced laughter only made things worse. "You're overreacting, Mark. We were just having fun," she insisted, but I could see the desperation in her eyes. I stood there, feeling the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I never thought I would be in this position, forced to confront my wife about an affair. I felt anger boiling in my veins, but mostly I felt heartbroken. How could she do this to us, to our family? It was like a punch to the gut. My heart raced, and I felt a mix of emotions: anger, confusion, and immense sadness. I wanted answers. I needed to know how long this had been going on. I was on the verge of shattering, but I held on tight to my composure. "Just tell me the truth, Linda. How long has this been happening?" Her silence spoke volumes. I could see the wheels turning in her head, calculating her next move, her next lie, and just like that I felt my entire world begin to unravel. The silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Linda shifted uncomfortably on the couch, her eyes darting to Jake, who had turned a ghostly shade of white. I could tell he wanted to bolt, but I wasn't going to let him off that easily. This was my home, my family, and I wasn't going to let them treat this situation lightly. Finally, Linda broke the silence. "Mark, please, it's not what it looks like." "Jake and I, not what it looks like." I cut her off, rage spilling over. "You're sitting here on the couch, laughing, drinking wine with the man we've hired to teach our kids. How can you stand there and say that?" Her expression shifted from panic to annoyance, as if I were the one being unreasonable. You're being dramatic. We were just having a friendly conversation. Friendly? I echoed, incredulous. Is that what you call it? When was the last time you had a friendly conversation with me like that? I took a deep breath, trying to rein in my anger. I knew I needed to keep control of myself, no matter how surreal this felt. How long has this been going on, Linda? She hesitated, glancing at Jake, who looked like he was about to melt into the floor. A month, she finally admitted, and my heart dropped. We've just been getting closer. A month. That was the moment everything changed. The moments of confusion, the changes in her behavior. I felt like a fool for not seeing it sooner. Getting closer. I repeated, my voice dropping to a low growl. You're having an affair with him. I didn't mean for it to happen, she exclaimed, her voice shaky. It just happened. It just happened. I laughed bitterly. You think that's an excuse? You think cheating on your husband is something that just happens? I was feeling neglected, Mark. She shot back, her defenses rising. You've been so focused on work and the kids, I thought I could find some support elsewhere. Support? I scoffed. You needed support from our kid's tutor. You couldn't just talk to me. She opened her mouth to respond, but I could see the guilt creeping into her eyes. You don't understand, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake gets me, he listens to me. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. That's because you're in the middle of an affair. How can you sit there and act like it's nothing? Jake finally found his voice, but it was weak and hesitant. Maybe I should go, he said, attempting to stand up. No, you sit back down, I commanded, pointing a finger at him. You're part of this too. You don't just get to walk away. He glanced nervously at Linda, clearly unsure of what to do next. I didn't mean to cause any trouble, he stammered. Trouble? I practically spat. You've ruined my life. You've ruined your career. What were you thinking, getting involved with a married woman? I don't know, he said, his voice trembling. It just happened, like she said. I shook my head in disbelief. You two deserve each other, I muttered. The confrontation spiraled into a messy back and forth, with Linda pleading for understanding while Jake attempted to justify his actions. I could feel every moment of my anger boiling within me, but instead of lashing out more, I decided it was time to take control of the situation. I said, this isn't just about the two of you. You've destroyed our family, and I can't just let this slide. Linda's expression flickered from feigned innocence to annoyance, and she snapped back. You're making this so much worse than it has to be. Worse. You're the one who decided to sleep with our kid's tutor. I shot back. This is not something I can just forget. In that moment, I felt my heart breaking. I didn't recognize my wife anymore, and the person sitting in front of me felt like a stranger. I had trusted her with everything, and now she was throwing it back in my face, all for a fling with someone who should have been a professional. My mind raced with thoughts of revenge. The idea of exposing Jake, of ruining his career, started to take shape. After all, he was the one who took advantage of my wife's vulnerability. It wasn't just Linda who had betrayed me. It was him too. With that thought, I found a sense of purpose. I wouldn't let this end without a fight. If they thought they could get away with this, they were sorely mistaken. As I stood there, adrenaline surging through my veins, I knew my life was about to change forever. The confrontation ended with Linda storming off to the bedroom, leaving me standing in the living room with Jake, who was now sweating bullets. I felt a rush of anger about how easily she had dismissed everything we built as a family. I glanced at Jake, who was still sitting on my couch, looking like a deer caught in headlights. Do you think this is over? I asked him, my voice low and menacing. Do you think I'll just let you walk away from this unscathed? He shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. I didn't mean to hurt you, he stammered. We didn't plan for this. Didn't plan, I echoed, incredulous. You think that makes it okay? You put your hands on my wife, Jake. You crossed a line. He opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. You're done teaching. I'm going to make sure of that. The color drained from his face, and I could see the reality of my words settling in. You can't do that, he pleaded, desperation creeping into his tone. I need this job. Guess you should have thought about that before you decided to sleep with a married woman. I shot back, my mind racing with the plan I was forming. I couldn't believe this was happening. I had trusted Linda to remain faithful, to respect our marriage, and she had betrayed me in the worst way. And Jake, He was just a kid, really, but he had taken advantage of her. I was angry at both of them, but right now my focus was on Jake. You think you can just come into my life, sleep with my wife, and walk away without consequences? I asked, my voice steady but filled with rage. You have no idea how wrong you are. He looked at me with wide eyes, clearly scared and realizing that he had stepped into a mess he could not untangle. I didn't ask for this, he said again, but the tremor in his voice told me he knew he was in deep trouble. I stepped back, taking a breath to calm myself. I didn't want to escalate the situation further. I needed to be smart about this. I began to think of all the ways I could expose him. He was a tutor, and surely there were regulations and standards he had to maintain. Linda's cries echoed from the bedroom, and I briefly felt a pang of guilt for what I was about to do. But that guilt quickly faded as I remembered her laughter with Jake, the betrayal that cut deeper than any knife. If she could throw away our family for a thrill, then I could take matters into my own hands. Listen, I said, lowering my voice but maintaining my intensity. I'm going to make sure you can never teach again. I'll contact every school in the area. I'll tell them exactly what you did. Jake's eyes widened in fear. You wouldn't do that, he exclaimed, panic evident in his voice. I'll lose everything. Exactly, I replied, a cold smile creeping across my face. And maybe then you'll understand the gravity of your actions. I stepped back and pointed toward the door, signaling for him to leave. Get out of my house. You're not welcome here anymore. He hesitated for a moment, glancing back at me, but I didn't waver. He bolted for the door, muttering something about how he was sorry, but I didn't care. The moment he was gone, I slumped back against the wall, my heart racing. I felt a mix of triumph and devastation. I had taken control in a situation that had spiraled out of my hands, but I also felt the weight of the situation settle over me. I had a decision to make. I walked into the bedroom where Linda was sitting on the bed, tears streaming down her face. Mark, she began, but I held up a hand to stop her. I wasn't ready to hear her excuses or her pleas for forgiveness. Don't, I said, my voice firm. You've made your choice, Linda, and now I'm making mine. She looked at me, confusion mingling with fear in her eyes. What do you mean? I'm going to expose Jake. I'm going to make sure he never teaches again. If you think this is just going to blow over, you're wrong. Her expression shifted from sadness to anger. You're being cruel, Mark. This is just going to hurt the kids. You're being vindictive. I shook my head. No, Linda, you've hurt the kids by betraying the trust of our family. You've made this choice and now I'm making mine. You don't get to act like a victim here. She opened her mouth to argue, but I didn't want to hear it. I turned on my heel and walked out of the bedroom, leaving her behind. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to jump. I knew this was only the beginning and the path ahead was going to be painful for all of us. I just hoped that in the end, I would find some semblance of peace among the chaos. The following days were a blur of anger, confusion, and cold determination. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, nor could I escape the reality of what Linda had done. I had a plan now, and it was time to execute it. I wanted to hurt Jake as much as he had hurt me. Maybe that was petty, but after what I witnessed, I didn't care. I decided to start gathering evidence. I went through emails and text messages, anything that could serve as proof of their affair. I didn't snoop too deeply. I'd previously respected Linda's privacy, but now I had no qualms about it. I scoured her phone and found messaging apps they used to communicate. Chat logs revealed more than I wanted to read. They exchanged flirtations, compliments, and even plans for secret meetings while I was at work. Each message stung like a bee, and the more I saw, the more resolve I felt. After gathering enough evidence, I put together a comprehensive email. I addressed it to the head of the tutoring agency that had employed Jake. I wanted to make sure they understood the gravity of the situation. My kids had been exposed to this man, and I had to protect them. Dear agency head, I typed, my fingers trembling as I wrote. I'm writing to inform you of an inappropriate relationship between one of your tutors, Jake Thompson, and my wife, Linda. This affair has not only shattered my family, but also puts your agency in a precarious position. Attached you will find evidence of their communications. I believe it is crucial for you to reconsider his employment. As I hit send, a sense of satisfaction surged through me. I felt like I was finally taking control of my life, and for the first time since discovering Linda's infidelity, I felt a flicker of hope that justice might be served. However, it wasn't over yet. I knew I had to confront Linda again, and I was dreading that moment. She sensed that I was distant, that I was plotting something, and I could see the fear and guilt in her eyes when we were together. But I didn't want to have that conversation until I had fully executed my plan. The next day, I received a response from the agency. They expressed shock and promised to investigate the matter further. I felt vindicated. I also began to consider the possibility of confronting Jake in person, perhaps even at his workplace. It was a risk, but the thought of seeing the look on his face when I exposed him fueled my desire for revenge. Meanwhile, things at home grew increasingly strained. Linda tried to engage with me, but I was stubborn. I didn't want to talk about feelings or pretend like everything was fine. It felt hollow. I caught her looking at me with a mix of regret and anger, but I couldn't bring myself to care. The silence between us felt like a chasm that neither of us could bridge. Finally, after a week of tension, I decided it was time to confront Linda. I called her into the living room. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm. She sat down hesitantly, her body language defensive. "About what?" "About Jake. I sent the evidence to his agency." Her face went pale, and for a moment I thought she might cry. "You did what?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I told them everything," I said, watching her reaction closely. "I informed them about your affair. You don't think you can just betray me like this and walk away without consequences, do you?" "Mark, please," she started, but I cut her off. "Don't. You're the one who made this choice. You think I'm being cruel. You're the one who shattered our family." Her expression shifted from shock to anger. "This is going to affect the kids." "You're being vindictive." "Maybe I am," I shot back, my heart racing. "But you don't get to play the victim here. You had your chance to come clean, to be honest, but instead you chose to lie and cheat." "I thought we were in a rough patch," she exclaimed, her voice rising. "I didn't think it was that serious. I thought I could just fix it. You were never home. Fix it by having an affair." My voice rose too, matching her intensity. "You didn't even try to talk to me about it. You jumped into bed with him." We were both shouting now, and I could feel the anger bubbling over. After everything she had done, I didn't care about being civil. Linda's eyes flashed with frustration. "You're so focused on revenge that you're not even thinking about what this will do to our family. Think about what your actions have done." I yelled back. "You've betrayed our kids, our home, our life together. You think I'm supposed to sit back and act like everything is fine?" For a moment we stood there in silence, both panting from the emotional eruption. I could see the hurt in her eyes, but I was beyond caring. I felt a darkness settle over me, and I knew I was ready for the next step. "I'm going to make sure Jake pays for what he did. I'm going to make sure he loses everything," I said, my voice cold and steady. Linda stared at me in disbelief, her expression a mix of anger and desperation. "Mark, please, don't do this. It will only make things worse." But I was done listening to her pleas. I had made my choice, and I wouldn't back down. I couldn't allow myself to feel guilty. This was about protecting my family, even if it meant tearing down the very foundation of it. The next few days felt like a whirlwind. I was consumed by the plan I had set in motion. I wanted to ensure Jake's career was ruined, and I was willing to go to great lengths to make it happen. I couldn't shake the anger that coursed through my veins every time I thought about him and Linda together, laughing and sharing moments that belonged to me. I reached out to more parents in our community who had used Jake as a tutor. I wanted to gather more evidence of his unprofessional behavior and expose him completely. I created an anonymous online account to post about his actions. I didn't want to go through the formal channels alone. I wanted to create a narrative that would stick. I warned parents to be cautious about letting him tutor their children. I pointed out the affair and emphasized how he had crossed professional boundaries. The response was swift. Parents began chiming in, sharing their concerns and experiences. Many were shocked and horrified, and soon enough, Jake's name began to circulate with negative connotations. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction as I watched him go from a respected tutor to a pariah almost overnight. But it wasn't just Jake I was targeting. I knew I needed to confront Linda one last time before taking decisive action. I wanted her to see the totality of what her actions had wrought, not just on me, but on Jake and her own life. I needed to make it clear that she wasn't the only one affected by her choices. I called her into the living room again. She entered, hesitantly, her expression wary. "What now?" she asked, arms crossed defensively. "Have you spoken to Jake since the agency got the email?" I asked, leaning forward in my seat. Her gaze dropped to the floor. "No, I haven't. He's been avoiding me. I think he's scared." "Good," I replied sharply. "He should be scared. I've made sure that everyone knows what kind of person he is. He's lost the respect of the community, and soon he'll be out of a job." "Mark, you're being extreme," she said, her voice rising. "This is just going to hurt the kids. What are you trying to accomplish? Do you think this will make me want to come back to you?" "Come back," I echoed, incredulous. "You think I want you back after what you've done? I just want you to understand the consequences of your actions." Her expression hardened. "You're going to ruin his life for a mistake. People make mistakes, Mark. Not like this, Linda. Not when you've crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed. You think an apology is enough. You've destroyed everything." I could see her processing the weight of my words, the reality of her actions crashing down around her, but the anger in her eyes still flickered. "You're only making it worse. You're not thinking about the kids." "Me? I'm not thinking about the kids," I shot back. "You were the one who brought this man into our home. You chose to cheat. You decided to put your desires above our family." Linda opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, she looked defeated. I could see it in her eyes. She knew she had lost. "Look at what you've done, Linda. You've hurt me, you've hurt Jake, and you've hurt our kids. I want you to realize that." She looked away, biting her lip, and for the first time I could see a hint of guilt creeping into her expression. "I never meant for any of this to happen," she murmured, almost to herself. "Never meant for it to happen," I repeated bitterly. "You had a choice every step of the way, and you chose to betray me." At that moment, I could feel the fragile remnants of our marriage shattering into a million pieces. I didn't recognize this version of her. The woman sitting in front of me was not the partner I had stood beside for 10 years. "I'm going to make sure Jake pays for what he did to us," I reiterated with a newfound resolve. "And if you're smart, you'll start thinking about what that means for you too." "Are you threatening me now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, I'm stating facts, Linda. This isn't just about him and me anymore. You chose this path, and now we're all paying the price." Our conversation lingered in the air like a thick fog. I could see her wrestling with the weight of her choices. I realized that while I was focused on revenge, I had also unknowingly thrown our family into chaos. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I couldn't allow myself to feel guilty. I had to stay resolute. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the events over and over in my mind. I had taken control, but at what cost? My heart was heavy with the realization that we were all going to suffer from the fallout of Linda's choices. As the days passed, Jake was officially let go from the tutoring agency, and the news spread like wildfire. Many parents were furious, but they directed their anger at him. Meanwhile, Linda was left to grapple with the repercussions of her actions. I watched as she retreated further into herself. She was no longer the vibrant woman I had married. She was a shell of her former self, consumed by guilt and shame. It was hard to see her like that, but part of me felt no sympathy. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Linda came into the kitchen, her shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sorry doesn't fix this, Linda," I replied, my tone hard. "You've shattered our family." "I know," she admitted, tears brimming in her eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to understand how sorry I am." I turned away, my heart torn. I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't shake the images of her with Jake, the betrayal so fresh in my mind. "I don't know what to do now," she said, her voice breaking. "Neither do I replied honestly. "But I do know that trust is gone. We can't go back to what we had." As I faced her, I wondered whether this was the end or just the beginning of a painful journey toward healing. I was still angry, still hurt, and the road ahead was unclear. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I also knew I couldn't keep living in this state of destruction. I would have to face the consequences of my actions, just as she would. The days turned into weeks, and the weight of betrayal was a constant presence in our home. Linda and I moved around each other like strangers in our own house. The laughter and warmth that once filled our family was replaced by a heavy silence, punctuated only by the sounds of our children playing outside, blissfully unaware of the turmoil swirling within their parents. I focused on work as a way to escape the emotional wreckage at home. I threw myself into projects, trying to drown out the thoughts of Linda and Jake. But no matter how much I immersed myself in my work, I couldn't shake the feeling of loss. I felt like I was grieving not just the trust I had in Linda, but the life we had built together. One evening, I came home later than usual, tired and drained from the day. I found Linda sitting at the kitchen table, looking lost in thought. She glanced up as I entered, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. "Mark," she started tentatively, "can we talk?" I wasn't sure what more there was to say. We had already dissected the situation countless times, but I could see the desperation in her eyes. I nodded, taking a seat across from her. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "About us, about the kids, about everything." "What's there to think about?" I replied, my tone sharper than I intended. "You made your choices, Linda. You chose to betray our family." "I know, and I can't express how sorry I am for that," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But I want to work on this. I want to try to fix what's broken." The sincerity in her voice hit me hard. Part of me wanted to believe her, to say yes and jump back into the life we once had. But another part of me, the part that was still wounded, resisted. "Fixing things takes time, Linda. Trust doesn't come back overnight," I said carefully. "You've hurt me deeply, and I'm not sure I can just turn that off." "I understand that," she replied, wiping her tears. "But I want to fight for our family. I want to show you that I can be the wife you deserve. I will do whatever it takes." I looked at her, searching for any trace of the woman I had once loved so completely. I could see the pain in her eyes, but I also saw the flicker of determination. It was a conflict within me. I wanted to see her succeed, but the wound was still fresh. "What does that look like exactly?" I asked cautiously. "What are you willing to do?" "I'll go to counseling," she said quickly. "I'll talk to someone who can help me understand why I made those choices. I'll be transparent. I'll let you see my phone, my messages, whatever you need to. Build that trust again." I considered her words. I had read about couples who found their way back after infidelity, but it required commitment from both sides. I wasn't sure I was ready to fully commit to that road. "And what about Jake?" I questioned, not wanting to let that part of her past slip by. "I'll never speak to him again," she promised, her voice firm. "I know that what I did was wrong, and I don't want to ever feel that way again. I love you, Mark. I want to rebuild our family." Those words hung in the air, heavy with possibility. I wanted to believe her, to feel that connection again, but I wasn't ready to trust. "It's going to take time," I reminded her gently. "I can't just forget what happened." "I know," she replied, her voice softer now, "but I'm willing to fight for you if you'll let me." In that moment, I realized that maybe, just maybe, we could start to heal. It would be a long and painful road, but I was willing to consider it. I nodded slowly, feeling the tension in my chest begin to ease, if only a little. "Okay," I said, taking a breath. "Let's start with counseling, but we're going to have to be open and honest, no more lies." "Absolutely," she said, relief washing over her face. That night, we sat together on the couch for the first time in what felt like ages. There was still an unmistakable tension between us, but it felt different, less like a chasm and more like a rocky path we might navigate together. As we moved forward, I could feel the weight of our struggles beginning to shift. There would be tough conversations and moments that would test our resolve, but I also felt a flicker of hope. It wouldn't be easy, but we were both willing to try and rebuild what had been lost. With each small step forward, I reminded myself that healing is a process. I realized that while the scars of betrayal would always remain, they didn't have to define us. We had the opportunity to rebuild our family, to forge a new path together. It would take time, effort, and unwavering commitment, but perhaps we could find our way back to a better place. In the end, I learned that love, though tested, can endure. Trust, once broken, can be rebuilt. And sometimes the hardest battles can lead to the most profound transformations. And with that thought, I took a deep breath, feeling the hope settle deep within me. This was just the beginning.